Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. I'm your host, Nino Gonzalez, again, joined by my co-host, Chen, and again, joined by Mike Kwong, but this time it's the birthday boy. We're a couple of days removed from Mike's birthday, and there's nothing I think he would rather do than be here talking about DIBS, right, Mike?
Absolutely. You got it.
We
Well,
did
well,
a
thank
getaway. We did a staycation day, and even on that, we couldn't stop. It's just part of us.
Well, I couldn't stop. I was bothering you, Pay, on asking questions about IBC because again, there's so many things that you learn so much, and as you evolve as a person, as an investor, the infinite banking concept will evolve as well. And that's kind of it. To me, it's a good thing, but if you're not strategically prepared, it could be a bad thing because you can get very overwhelmed by all of these strategies that you can do and trying to figure out, well, what's right for me, what's not right. Well, that person's doing this. And I think that's kind of why we're here to kind of clear it up. And that's why we have the expert in Mike. So again, if you guys are new to the podcast, like this is your first time, please go back to our first episodes talking about velocity banking. But this will be a continuation of the previous episode we just did. So if you haven't listened to the last one, please go back and listen to that one first. I forgot to mention on the last one to go on YouTube to watch this because Mike and Pei have created awesome slides, PowerPoint slides that we're following along on this, and we will again on this one. And if you're like me, and I think most people, when it comes to these concepts, I think just seeing numbers is so much better than hearing it because you're trying to think about it and write it down. So definitely turn to the YouTube page for these episodes. And who knows how many of these we're going to do because, as we mentioned last time, and as I've kind of briefly discussed earlier on, there's so much you can do with this. And I think we've gotten good feedback from having people kind of see the way Mike teaches, the way Pei expresses, the way I learn as a student. I think it gives people these creative ideas. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
This is like a sneak peek of coaching session with Mike and I, or Mike himself.
Yep. So this is where we ended last time. Again, I'm going to just do like a very, very brief recap. Obviously, we're talking about passive income with IBC. DIBS 1.0 was replacing your line of credit. That's kind of the basics, which is, again, if you're starting off, still better than nothing. We talked about the teriyaki method where we're using our policy purchase or our renewal as an amortized note to pay us back, which is what you see here, and just kind of rinsing and repeating over and over and over again. And again, I want to reiterate how I concluded the last episode, which was this is already a very, very advanced topic. Like if you're doing this, you're way ahead. But we know that once we want to just show people that there's more that can be done as you kind of master these strategies, or if you want more sooner, we want to be able to provide that. So moving forward, this episode and then maybe subsequent episodes, if we continue to do multiple series to this, this will be advanced stuff. This will be like, definitely become your own banker. Definitely read Dibs on Your Money. Go through our YouTube page for all of the velocity banking videos we did in the previous IBC one before even touching this, because I promise you, this will blow your mind. Hey, Mike, anything you guys want to wrap up with DIBS 2.0, DIBS 1.0 before we dive in?
Sure. Just to recap, what DIBS 2.0 is, right? It's the application of, your stacking system, in this case, to franchise a brand new policy, right? And you can do so without skipping a beat as far as your stacking schedule goes. But what the new policy in turn gets to do is provide you that, cash flow on a monthly basis as the investment itself. So that's what we're looking at on this slide. And like I said, I think this is kind of where we finished out, right?
Yeah, it's really, goes back to the IBC. Well, the policy is not an investment, but we are here treating it as if we invest, as an investment. So it's just a mental switch, right? It's just a mindset change. And once it click for you, then it makes sense.
Right. I mean, it's really literally providing you that liquidity while you're doing your stacking, right? Whether you call it an investment or not, I mean, even a brand new policy is, the ideal source from which those 36 months of, cash flow flows.
So I think it's important to understand these mechanics because as we move on, we're kind of building upon this. Although it's a different type of strategy, it builds upon these mechanics. So ready? Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
Ready.
go. Let's go 3.0. All right.
Deep dive.
Hyperdrive. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay. You want to start, Pei, or?
Sure. So DIBS 3.0 or beyond advanced strategies, we're going to still keep it as simple as we possibly can. But the fundamentals here is you must fully already by now, hopefully, understand the power and benefit of IBC. Otherwise, you're not, we're not going to rehash too much about the benefits anymore here. You pretty much get it. But also at the same time, you may already own 2 policies or more, right? You already have multiple policies that are structured in the IBC style. And then also on top of that, you either have some understanding of passive income stacking or the whole cash flow stacking method, or you have already been doing it for some time. So you understand the mechanics of moving the money from account to account and what that can potentially achieve for you, right? If you don't know what that achievement is going to be like, go back to the previous recording that we did where I mapped out 20 years of doing this strategy, what that can potentially look like on a monthly passive income side, which is incredible. So now that you have all these 3 things in place, right? You also, the last piece is kind of, we had mentioned that, the coaching, right? You want to work with someone who's experienced in doing that. And not just someone who like kind of understands it in theory but haven't done it themselves. So all these pieces, once you have it, the setup is pretty simple. This is actually our exact situation a couple years ago. This is our situation. We had multiple policies. We were doing the income stacking. We had a policy that had about $20,000 of available cash value, right? That we were using as a line of credit already in our 1.0 strategy. And then we also had a IBC policy that was a little bit larger. It had a IBC, it had a cash value hole or a negative balance that we borrowed out already. We borrowed $50,000, and we decided at the time, that was 2020, that it makes sense to build a pool because we were all home and didn't have much to do. So we used that $50,000 instead of a construction loan from the pool company. We had the bank. We used that. We drained the bucket. We borrowed against it, and we used it to build a fantastic, beautiful pool at the time. And so now we have an empty bucket, and that's where the advanced strategy kind of birthed out of this situation, right?
Yeah. So I just want to add, right? That's a real life example of how IBC can, use and benefit you for anything in life, literally, right? I mean, this is a pool that obviously the 50,000 isn't necessarily, netting a 3% return or anything like that, but it was something that we wanted, that we would enjoy and that we would spend anyways and send interest to somewhere else. So at the very least, we were doing one better by, sending ourselves back this interest by, internalizing that debt. But just like Pei said, this is where we were. We're laying the table. We've got $20,000 of available cash value in policy A. Okay. And policy B, we have a current outstanding whole or, balance of $50,000. So, some people might look at that and be like, oh no, this is a terrible problem. I owe more than I have in, one policy than the other. But actually, this setup affords a very perfect opportunity to apply this advanced strategy. So let's start with that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this should look familiar, right? All we're doing is borrowing, the $10,000 from policy A, okay? And then using that to pay down policy B in order to fill back that $50,000 hole, if you would, okay? So off the bat, we can imagine we are, up to $40,000 of a balance there. But of that $10,000, now we're going to put that to work, okay? And what we mean by that is we start that monthly cash flow cycle where $300 in this example, again, and we're using conservative, even lower numbers than real life, but to keep it simple, $300 a month now, policy B is going to be providing as that liquidity to policy A. And plus the $2,000 cash flow that you have on a monthly basis that we're dedicating to this process, that totals $2,300. Now, if you take the $10,000 balance that we started with for the stack 1 and you pay consistently $2,300, it takes about 4.4 months, which you can see beneath that black line there. Okay. And overall, we round up, again, just being conservative takes about 5 months to pay off this very first cash value loan. Now let's track, where we're at this point. If you've taken, over the course of those 5 months, $300 at a time, that's $1,500 paid out from policy B. So if we account for that, the third bullet there says policy B's bucket loan balance tracked here is 50,000 that we started with minus the 10, right? Because we put that in to repay it, plus over the 5 months, the $300 at a time, $1,500. So we're just kind of tracking at this point. At the end of the first stack, you've got about $41,500 of an outstanding balance, whereas before we kicked it off with 50. So we see some progress being made here, right? Now, we're also at policy A. The bucket's full and you're ready to start stack 2. Anything anyone want to?
Yeah, I want to ask a question before we go on to stack 2. So the $300 a month loan payment, why did you decide to do 300? What are you amortizing the money from policy B to policy A at? And why did you choose that number?
It's a little bit less than 8%. And if you know me already, I don't like to do random odd numbers. So I rounded it down to make the math easier. It's just easier to see. But this is a good point that you asked. You are the banker on both sides of the equation. So if you are controlling the cash flow out of your bucket B, you can set your own numbers, right? I wouldn't go crazy and start taking out a ton of money, but I would stay within reasonable limits. You can amortize maybe between 8 to 12 to 13%. Maybe, right? If you're like me and you don't like odd numbers, round it up to 330 a month, right? You're in control of the equation in this situation. So, and this is obviously for illustration purposes. So we're using round numbers to make it easier to understand.
Yeah, just another point to add is that, when we think about the 36 months, amortization schedule, like what's enough, right? I mean, obviously there's the 36 months of payment, and then there's the interest rate that you can, kind of eke out as a profit. Between the two metrics, right? The most important thing by far, I feel, is that 36 month of steady return. Okay, you don't necessarily need, a 20% return on the outside investment or whatever that is, especially if in real life half these, or a good number of these don't last for 36 months, right? Who cares if it's a 20%, return when it cuts out at month 20 and you're lacking 16 months. So the point is about consistency and control. And for this example, we actually pared down, the $300 from, a real life, opportunity that may pay you $320, $330. But like Pei said, within your own policy, you can literally ramp this up within limits, easily to $350 or so. But just to show how this concept works with the lowest numbers, we're using 300 here. Okay.
So I was probably going to wait to ask this question, but I do want to ask it now. Assuming you amortize at, let's just say 8%, or let's say somebody wants to do 10% or 12%. The number one thing that I always got hung up on when I first learned this was, where are we getting, how is the policy growing to justify the growth? Because I understand if you put 10,000 in, and of course, you guys, we haven't shown this on the podcast, but you guys have shown this to me, how you could borrow at 10% and put in an investment at making 0% rate of return, where you're just effectively paying back your principal.
Yes. So you bring up a perfect point. We're talking about interest rate parity, right? A lot of people will call that arbitrage, right? But the thing is that they're looking at it on a, annual basis only. So you can look at, 4% here, 8% here. It seems like 4% is always going to be less than the 8%. However, what we're not looking at is this might be 4%, amortized, right? It might be a 6-year car loan. And this 8% may be a simple interest revolving line of credit, or even better yet, a policy loan, which wouldn't never be 8% that I know of. But there's the difference, right? The other thing is, think about the duration of, the debt. The 4%, maybe you're earning it, but it's over 36 months, right? The 8% or the higher expense or interest, you're only using for 4 or 5 months at a time. So just imagine, like Nelson always said, it's not about the rate, it's the volume, right? So that's important.
Also, I think this is one of the bootcamp examples that Mike Everett from Life Success and Legacy always use, which is that CD sisters from the book from Nelson Nash, where he shows the graph of someone who goes, this is long story, but who goes to buy a car using cash versus someone who takes the money and puts it in a CD and then borrow against it. It's the direction of the interest, right? One is you're paying on a balance that's ever decreasing. And then this one on this side, you're earning interest on an ever increasing. So the compounding kind of plays a little bit of role in here as well.
And then with that, if you amortize 8 or 10%, whatever number you classify it, where is that 8 or 10% growth going to come from at the end of 36 months when you're paying yourself back?
So if you're talking about having enough cash value in the policy to provide that 8 to 12% growth, don't forget that your policy itself has a surplus of cash value. Back to the teriyaki example, right? Even that very first year, we always joke, first year is the worst year because you have the least, liquid access to your premium, anywhere, 50, 60% or so. But even that 50 or 60%, if you're looking at a 3-year note, right, only needs to pay about 40% per year, right? Because remember, this is flowing on a monthly basis. It's not taking the full 100% all at once. It's taking 136 of that amount every month over the course of the next 3 years. So even at 60%, which seems, anemic, that's more than enough. When you see that over the next 3 years, it might average to maybe 40% a year. The second year, of course, you have a bigger surplus because remember from the illustrations, that second year can add an additional 90 or 90% more of that extra cash value. When again, the second year is only requiring another 40% for those next 12 months of that year too. So that's the part that's kind of lost sometimes. The actual internal growth of the policy is way more than you'll need for any one stack.
Right. And also don't forget you do have, and we didn't address it on this in this example, is that there's always an overage, right? When you're doing your stacks, it doesn't perfectly end. For example, even here, right? It took 4.4 months to finish a stack payoff, right? You're never going to be ending exactly at 10,000. There's always a little bit more, right? Or if you wait till the next month, there's even more. So you have the choice in here. You have the control to, do I want to throw a little bit more cash flow to finish faster? Or do I want to play the honest banker and use the overage to, keep it in my policy B so that I can have enough cushion, right? To make sure that I have enough payment. So just some of the nuances to that is obviously not displayed here. Those are the kind of coaching sessions that we do to get really detailed into that. But so those are kind of the things that we kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's why I was asking, because it just goes to show going back to the option component too. And I think that what intimidates people about this is the fact that they're the ones responsible. There's no excuses. There's no, oh, this investment didn't pay me 36 months, or, oh, no, the line of credit, they raised my interest rate, or they took away my line of credit. That's none of that. There is flat out no excuses. So you're responsible for controlling both sides. That's a good thing for somebody who wants to have control. But this is why I really emphasize the importance of understanding the base mechanics, because if you try to do this without A, understanding the mechanics, and B, having proper coaching, you can very easily run into a brick wall and essentially hurt yourself if you're not careful. So
no, just to quote Spider-Man, right? One of my favorite heroes from childhood. With great power comes lots of responsibility, right? And that's exactly what's going on here. When you have an IBC policy, infinite banking. Hello, I is infinite. The applications are endless. And even here, you can see there's so many different ways that you can, use a policy to benefit your stacking system. But with that, like Nico said, exactly, you have control. You can't blame the bank anymore because you're the bank. You can't blame the investment anymore because you're controlling that flow. So and you better track it. That's the key.
You're right. Okay, let's go to stack 2.
Yep, stack 2 we can go through more quickly, right? Obviously, you're just repeating, the same move from the 4, but the results are going to vary a little bit, but for the better. Now, You can see at the top, bucket A lends another 10,000, or that you could say the same, right, from the same policy to bucket B. However, that 10,000 now is refilling, a $41,500 hole, right? The hole's been refilled by some. And again, just as before, the $10,000 is getting to work. Right away, we're having another 300 a month for the next 36 months that is coming back to policy A. However, because we have the stack 1 in progress already, we can add that for the total of $600 a month now of passive income flowing from policy B, because we've got 2 stacks in concert paying back at the same time. Now, with a $2,000 monthly cash flow, all right, we're totaling now a repayment rate of $2,600 a month. That's going to pay off your $10,000 a bit quicker this time. And you can see underneath that black line to the right, 3.9 months, right? Whereas before it was 4.4. We're starting to gain speed and traction. So in the blue box below, it takes, again, we're just rounding up for conservative sake, 4 months about to pay off cash policy loans A's cash value loan. And over that time to track it, 4 months times 600 is $2,400. Okay, so we're going to kind of reassess where we're at. Policy B's bucket loan balance. Again, we started with 41.5 minus the 10,000 because we added that back with stack 2, plus another drain over 4 months of the 2,400 nets you, just to keep us on track, an outstanding loan balance after stack 2 of 33,900. Okay, so we see how there's an ebb and flow, right? Each stack is going to dump in more to refill a chunk of it. Over the next couple months, that chunk is going to decrease a bit, right? But you're always going to be gaining to refill that $50,000 we started with of a hole. And now we're at
how hard it was to find that. You know how hard it was to find that graphic with the hose filling the bucket and then a spigot draining out the money slowly before ChatGPT?
I was gonna say, you guys did this pre-ChatGPT. I could create
Absolutely.
this in 2 seconds now. Just prompt chat like, "Hey, I need this." That's fair.
But there we go. Yeah, perfect.
But it's the best illustration. It is the best illustration because the bucket's filling up faster than the bucket is draining.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe we can shut that little valve a little bit so it's just a couple drops at a time. Each drop is.
Yeah, you can use AI to redo all of it.
That's right.
But now we're on stack 3.
Stack 3, same thing. Okay, we're still at the $10,000 stack size. However, big difference right there underneath the black line. Guess what? It's going to be quicker again. Instead of 3.9 months, right now we're shaving it down to 3.5 because we have a total of $2,900 flowing back to repay the $10,000 from policy A. And just a quick number check there, and the third bullet down, our $33,900 hole has been refilled by 10 and then drawn out by 3,600, leaving us with the 27,500 now. So you can see that 50,000 is getting paid back over these stacks. Again, bucket A is full and you're ready to rock with stack 4. Now, stack 4, the last time I think we're going to need to borrow 10,000, okay, to refill bucket B. And that bumps up our passive income to, what is it, 3,200. Well, no, plus our cash flow.
Of it's 1,200 is the cash flow.
Yeah, so $1,200 of passive income. Remember, the 1,200 is 4 iterations or 4 monthly payments of $300 because of those 4 stacks at work now, plus the 2,000, greasing the sleds from our own contribution. But that pays off the $10,000 in just 3.2 months, right? You can see $3,200, so just over 3 months. And again, in the box below, we're rounding up for conservative sakes. It takes about 4 months, let's say, right? Now, $4,800, would be paid out from policy B, but bucket B loan balance, we can track again is the 27.5 we started with, minus 10, plus 4,800. We're only 22.3 in the hole when we're ready to increase our stack size in this case. Okay.
So why?
Good question.
He asked me the same question. So we could at this point just do one more 10K, or because we're paying it off. The reason why I increase here because I know that none of us are going to be using $300. We're actually going to be speeding it up a little bit more, at least using 330 or if not more per month from the bucket B cash value loan. So I'm just gonna assume that you're a hard charger and you're gonna take a little bit more cash flow. So you should be at this point, according to my projections, you should be paying off your $10,000 in a little bit less than 3 months, right? So that difference per month differential, it does make a difference. It does speed it up. So I'm going to just follow that plan and say, hey, at this point, I'm ready to increase the stack to 15,000.
So one other point too is, why increase it to 15,000? Well, in this case, because we can. Remember, our policy A had a capacity of $20,000. Let's say you started with, a line of credit from the bank that, they kind of said you could use. If you're stuck at 10 or 15, thousand, well, you're stuck there until, you can either get a second line of credit or increase that line. With our policies, they grow every year, by the way. So you can, and to Pei's point, you have control here. If you use realistic numbers, then by the fourth stack, typically you could go up in size. And I want to give another analogy. What we're doing here, right? Each time you're stacking, you're speeding up that revolution of the money. Think about it that way. And just like riding a bike in the first gear, okay, at that $10,000, that's your $10,000 gear. You can do 4 good revolutions here, and you're already picking up speed. Soon enough, when you're riding a bike, you're spinning your wheels, right? You're only going so fast at the first gear of $10,000. You're going to have to, because it starts repeating so quickly. And some rules, we would say when you're closer to 2 months at a time, you're paying off. You definitely got to bump up to the second gear. And that's when you would bump up, that $15,000 in this example. And that'll slow you down again. Remember, just like the bike, it'll be a little bit harder to pedal again and you'll slow down certainly, but your overall vehicle, yourself on the bike will be moving at a faster rate.
I love that analogy. You guys do it all the time, but it just clicks. Okay. Stack
it's
5.
Helpful. All right, stack 5. Now we're rolling at second gear, okay? The big difference here, okay, it's the same process. I want to reiterate, this isn't necessarily rocket science. As brilliant as it is, when you get it, it'll click, okay? The main difference on this slide is since we've moved up to the 15,000, the passive income has also increased. Now, instead of adding by 300 at a time for each stack, that 15,000 is netting you about 450. Okay, again, conservative numbers, 450 a month. So if you add the 450 to the amount before, plus your cash flow, that results in the $3,650 there you see below the black line. And with that amount on a monthly basis, it just takes you, it slows you down. Admittedly, the 15,000 is a bigger amount that we're paying back, but you have a little bit more on a monthly basis to do so. So that in concert will slow you down to now 4.1 months. From the 3.2 I think we were at before. So you can see that in play with these numbers. Literally, you're slowing down again because you're at that higher gear, but it was worth it because you're building scale. Okay. So to recap, takes about, again, rounding up 5 months, let's say conservatively to pay it off. And overstating that, I would say you've got 8,250 being paid out of policy B. Okay. Let's track that with where we're at. You started with a balance of the 22.3. Right? Minus the 15,000 that we refilled with stack 5, you have to also account for that monthly drain of 8,250 over the course of that, 5-month period. So now from 22.3, we net with 15,550 and we're ready for stack 6. Hope that was clear.
This is where things start getting crazy. Now we're getting into the deepers of the deepers. So go ahead, round stack 6.
Yeah. Okay, so stack 6 is really fun. Why? Okay, again, we're just gaining speed. From that 4.1 months that we reset to, hey, now we're gaining even faster. We're at 3.6 months, right? The passive income, right, coming back is 2,100 plus our 2,000 results in a total of the 4,100 a month that's flowing back to pay the 15,000. So at 3.6 months to complete stack 6, again, rounding up, let's assume it's $8,400 that you got to pay for those 4 months. Let's track the 8,400, right? Starting with that balance of 15,550, we're lighter by another 15,000 because we refilled it that much. And then we drained or moved, 8,400 over the course of those 4 months for a net balance at that point of 8,950 from 50,000. Remember, we started owing with. Now we only have a hole of the just shy of 9,000. Now policy bucket is pretty much full at this scale, and we're ready to start stack 7. But to pause, let's just take a recap of where we're at. Congratulations, you've reused your policy A's cash value, primarily at 10,000 at a time for the first 4, and then 15,000 at a time, for the last 2. Total of 6 times you've gotten to use and reuse these same dollars from the insurance company 6 times in 26 months. So that's the power of, this, velocity banking, income stacking. You're getting to roll that capital forward and upwards. And policy B is full. And now, arguably, you may need new buckets, okay, or not, depending on the scenario.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I wanted to bring out another highlight here. So not only did you use that money 6 times in 26 months, but if you look at what's coming in passive income, that's greater than what you're contributing. This is the break-even point of that. So we're bringing in from our stacks $2,100, and yet we're contributing $2,000. So now, of course, it's not the same because you can't just take that $2,100 and run away. You'll melt this completely. But it just goes to show that within less than 2 years, by running the same dollars over and over and over again, and again, this works even if you don't do the IBC policy system and you're using an outside line of credit, that's already good enough. This is just maximizing within a maximized protocol. So you're now at the same cash flow contribution per month that you are contributing yourself. So keep that in mind. I think that's a big thing. And now digest all this. If you need to recap what we just did, pause it here, go back and replenish, redo it. If you need to come up with your own strategy for how you're going to do it for these 2 buckets, good. Because now things are going to get a little crazy.
Again, this is advanced strategy and beyond. I want to make sure that people don't think that they can just get a new policy and start doing this tomorrow. We are here talking about something that we're just trying to spark your imagination of what possibly could happen down the road, right? So imagine the bucket B scenario. Like go back to 2020 when Mike and I just started doing this. Had we maybe said, instead of building my pool, I took the $50,000 cash value that I built up over the years in my policy, and I went and did an investment instead, right? And that investment happens to be another 3-year note type thing, right? So if you go down, to the move this.
I just wanted to show people where it says the investments in green there. Because again, I want to make sure we're following along, because this is where things will get really complicated here. Again, we have $50,000 of available cash value here. We've already done, or we're following the mechanics of teriyaki. We did a DIB cycle, a full DIB cycle. Now we have that replenished at $50,000. So just keep in mind where we're at. And now we're going to get into this stuff blows my mind. Okay.
All right.
Supercharged.
So that $50,000. Imagine I had purchase an asset instead of buying doing that, right? So if I had done the 3-year amortized note with Prosper, with Ground Floor, Paper Stack, PML deal, Networthy, whatever, right? Anything that pays you amortized monthly cash flow for the 36 months, right? We drain that bucket. Now we can borrow. We can actually just do that process over and over again, right? So we're supercharging this process. So let's take a look at the next slide. What happens when you supercharge it with an asset purchase?
So I want to pause there again because I want to point out the emphasis of why the IBC concept is known as the and asset. Because what Pei's mentioning right now is you could have done this instead of buying a pool, or you could have done this after buying a pool. So remember, we have to recap going back to where we were here. At the end of this, which is only 2 years. I mean, if you're borrowing money to go build a pool, how long is it going to take you to build off that pay off that money that you're borrowing from a bank to finance your pool, right? It's going to take you a few years plus all the interest that you're paying to another bank. So you have your pool now, you're enjoying it, you're living your life. Now you just not even by being super strategic about it, just because of the fact that you've been flowing this, it's naturally building up bucket B. You didn't really have to do much except follow this, because again, the reason why you're refilling bucket B, secondary to it, is to refill the bucket. The primary thing is to get your stacks going, right? You're using the bucket B to get your stacks going. But now it just happens that in the process of getting your stack sizes growing, oh, well, you've just filled up your bucket B and now you need something to do with it. So we need to emphasize that point. Okay.
And so here visually, you have to imagine that asset, $50,000, is paying you the $1,500 monthly, and you're doing the stacks.
So to the right, you see, $50,000 amortized note. This is something that's now happening, at the same time, okay, that you can do. Because again, the whole idea, the power to this is that you can get your money working multiple times concurrently. And this is exactly what's going on here, where that $50,000 instead of a pool, right? Or maybe after the pool can be used again. And now instantly just providing an extra $1,500 a month in this case for the next 3 years or so. All the while, you've reset that process and you have that $50,000 opportunity again, as far as the outstanding loan balance goes, to continue stacking at the 15,000 and growing from there, or 10,000 in this picture. Up to you.
Well, we also were kind of chatting a little bit before about, so even if you did use your 50K to pay off debt or absorb some, which we like to call it turning the wind current, you absorb some outside debt that had existed before, you paid off some things, that cash flow that frees up, a dollar saved is a dollar earned, or a penny saved is a penny earned, whatever that saying is, right? So as long as you're disciplined and you recapture those cash flow that was going out the door to the third party, right? As long as if you're paying down debt, or even if you didn't invest, even if you used it to pay off debt, make sure you're recapturing that cash flow that was going out to add to your system, right? So that $1,500 per month could potentially come from a third party investment, or it could come from yourself through the method of buying out your own debt, right?
By what you're saving. So I do want to ask a question, because so let's assume you did this after you purchased the pool, or let's assume we've already purchased our first income producing asset here. Now, going back to here, policy B has to pay us for 36 months total, right? It's paying us for policy A. From what we're flowing, it has a $300 a month loan payment plus $450. How do we account for that when it comes to this? When it comes to policy B, because we can't drain the full 50,000, because it has to still have some cash in there to pay back policy A, correct?
So when you drain, if you are doing this supercharge method, you drain that bucket of 50,000, you have to use that $50,000 to buy an asset that replace or exceeds the cash flow that you were replacing. So you're kind of doing a reset. So this is kind of exactly what I've actually personally done, is I had money that was sitting in an investment that was paying me, monthly, right? And I actually ended up closing that account, and I moved that money into an asset that was just paying equal roughly. So I kind of reset that clock, right? Because before, when I was stacking into this $50,000 bucket, it was kind of staggered. I have various payments coming out over, the next 36 months or so. When I do a reset, right, this is moving that whole entire asset to another bucket, you would call it, that kind of reset the time clock on that money. So that entire bucket now, instead of having things falling off at different times, now that entire bucket is reset to 36 months, and that bucket is going to pay out for 36 months. Does that make sense?
And your point is right on. It still owes that flow of cash coming out.
Yes.
So if you were to drain, and if you only had 50,000 to start over again, you're right. There's not enough. But this is that shadow effect that I mentioned earlier about your policies growing each year, right? It doesn't stay stagnant at that $50,000 of available cash value that you drained out initially. That was at year one. But by the third year, I mean, you can look at any of your policies, mine at the third year, you've way more than tripled that $50,000 of amount of cash value that's there. So it's all that extra cheddar on top, right, that we haven't even touched that can still continue to provide that liquidity for those remaining stacks that are still owed those extra months of money. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And Pei, I understood what you were coming from, but Mike, that's the question I was asking. Because if I could tell myself, me personally, 3 years ago, kind of what to do and how to do it, it would be this. This is what I would tell myself to do. Because going back to our offline conversation, Mike, this is the purpose of why it's important to not always have outstanding policy loans. Because if you're not accounting for when you pay your premium, assuming if you take those premiums right back out, you then don't have that wiggle room and that quote unquote cheddar on top, then you can't do this appropriately because now your bucket B is only going to be at 50,000 because you're taking that money out and rolling it into, presumably you're doing it to another asset. I don't want to confuse people because this is like DIBS within DIBS times 2. So I just wanted to make that point with you, Mike. But yes, this is a very good point that you could simultaneously, you're basically doing a stack within a stack. Yes?
That could be, stackception, right? As we joke. No, but I mean, again, if any viewers are kind of a little lost at this point, it's okay. This is advanced level, and that's why we're here, to answer your questions and to flesh it out for you. And again, with that first slide, the assumption is you've had your policies for some time. You understand intimately how IBC works and the cash values grow. This is not for beginners, and I'll be the first to say that. So get with a coach. Find someone. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this.
Well, you can't just get with any coach. You literally have to get with you, Mike, because you wrote the book on this.
That's fair. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. Before we dive in, let's finish off the last slide, which is this.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yep. So again, this is just that process repeated again, but with that side stack, if you would, the stackception going on, because of that extra boost of $1,500 a month. Everything there in the box on the lower green, the green box on the left is sped up. Remember, it was like at 4 months and then 3.9 and then whatever months. Now it's shaved down to 2.6, 2.4, and then you bump up again. That's
what that asterisk is for, the month 3, the stack 3 and 4. That's because you're paying down your stack so fast already, you're bumping up faster.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So instead of doing 4 stacks of 10,000 in the before, because of this booster stack on the side, you're actually being able to increase your stack size even faster.
And again, that's if you stayed at the same scale, but you really afforded yourself, gears 2 and 3 now, maybe in the next iteration of the next 4 or 5 stacks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So again, to reiterate, yeah. I wanted to just, again, reiterate the point here because it's similar, but it's different than this concept right here. Okay. It's not, you don't have to do it after, you could do it instead of. Again, going back to what Pei originally said, and I think this is the slide here, where the example of you just have to have a $50,000 cash value loan. How you choose to have that loan, and if you're strategic about it, at least being intentional. If you want to buy the pool, buy the pool. If you want to buy your investment, buy the investment. If you want to buy out your car purchase and turn that wind current inside, it's still, again, $1 saved is $1 made. So just keep that in mind. Because as we're going to hear, it's the same concept, right? Policy A lends to policy B and pays us back. What it does, though, in the other slides is it makes it just go faster. Because you see it takes about 4 stacks to get up a little bit. But in this next one, it takes almost 2 stacks to meet that same amount. So you want to make sure, and even, correct me if I'm wrong, now I'm going to go off the rails here, all right? Because I'm going to be a little bit creative. There's 2 thoughts I had. 1, if you decided, you could also do a hybrid of both. You could take the $50,000 that you have, and let's say you wanted the boat. Or it could be a boat, but let's say you wanted the pool, right? Go get a quote on what the pool company is going to charge you. Go and whatever the pool company was going to charge you for that $50K to borrow, you then pay that to yourself in the form of a policy. And you're running this strategy by what you're saving from paying outside. You're running this strategy. You're paying that cash back to you. You're running these stacks through. That's one option. that you're going to do. And I lost my train of thought for the second option. But it basically just gives you the control of what you're able to do with however much you want to put in and where you want to put it into. It gives you that element of control.
So I had, this is not my own personal situation. I was actually helping someone through this process. So someone had started doing the stacking and had maybe four or five stacks that they have done. And it was with an outside vendor, right? It was an outside investment company. And they were not pleased with it. They were not happy with it. So they asked me what to do. So essentially, I look at the balance that's remaining that they're still having to, they can expect their future value of the asset. And I said, why don't you call them up, liquidate the whole thing, right? And do a reset. So they did that. They took all their remaining balance out from the cash out the account. And luckily it was an account that it was liquid, right? They could actually sell their positions and whatever and get all the money out, and took the original remaining balance out, and they invested into another company that pays the 36 months payment fixed per month. So that essentially, right, even though they had staggered 4 stacks or 5 stacks already in there, they were going to expire at different times, but they kind of consolidated everything into one giant bonus stack for themselves or starter stack for themselves with a new company that pays about the same. And that payment was equal to what they were going to get, but now it's reset the clock on that for 36 months.
The only point I was going to make was I just want to urge caution to that. Although you can do that with some companies, not all companies will allow you to liquidate. And number 2, don't chase the returns, because this is something people get very tempted to do. Just because you can liquidate doesn't mean you should. Take the money out and then you find something else that's paying better, a percentage point more amortized over 36 months. But how much more risk does it have? I just like to caveat that, because again, I go back to the point that Pei always makes is she had in their scenario, they had Pei as kind of her coach, her guidance counselor, if you will, hold-handing throughout the whole process. Whereas if you're trying to do it on your own, you're not going to know, am I comparing this to the right thing? So just keep that in mind.
Oh, yeah,
that is
definitely
such an awesome.
And it was a very conservative move. It actually went from something that they felt was actually riskier. It had a potential upside. It was to invest in the market. Market swings were just freaking them out. And it was not a good experience anyways with the vendor. So for them, it was a twofold reason to move. One, they did not enjoy the experience. The customer service was not great. And then the second part, it was in an asset class that they weren't comfortable to begin with, right? So that was kind of, they wanted to reset that into something that was collateral based, that was a little, just passive, and they don't have to worry about it. So actually it's a double benefit for them to move it into the new asset that potentially, pays roughly the same. Because remember, we are always looking for something that the number one rule of Warren Buffett's investment strategies, return of principal. We want our original money back, plus just a little bit of positive, earning if possible. So we don't need to chase or switch around trying to chase, hey, this one is offering me 15.5%, right? Can you beat that? No, that's not what we're after. We have to look at our psychology. Like, why are we making this change, right? So.
And this move, for some reason, brings to mind to me, like when you refinance your mortgage that you've, paid for like 7 years, you refi it and you think, hey, what a deal. I'm getting a little, 1% off or more, right? But really, essentially what you're doing is all those years that you paid, okay, now you're on, year 7, let's say, and you owe 23 more years on that 30-year mortgage originally. Well, when you refinance it, you just reset that cost. And if you understand amortization schedules and the way they build that front load of interest, you're just jumping right back at the hottest point of that, burn at the beginning for another 30, years, right? So it kind of reminds me of what, is going on here. And whereas with the refi example, when you're paying that amortized interest, it hurts. But here, where you're earning that, right?
You're capturing it. You're the bank side.
It's great.
Yeah, so, I'll said it all the time. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. No, I go back to kind of what I've been saying with all of this. It's when you know it's what Nelson says, when you know
what's going on.
yeah, when you know what's going on type of thing. So no, I this is incredible. I think this is, and again, this is still for you guys, like this is still kind of scratching the surface of what's brewing beneath. Like there's still more that can be done. And Mike, I mean, I would love for you to come on a couple more times so we can really dive into other crazy scenarios and long-term strategies. Cause I know where I'm at now. And the three of us have talked. Like I like to look at the long-term play of the durability of it, because it's when you start, I think when you absorb all this information, as probably a lot of people are right now, or maybe they're a year into it or just starting, you want to absorb it all, but you very, very much get tempted to do it all. And you want to accomplish everything. And it's like, oh my God, I can't wait to do this. But at the same time, there's something to be said about the value of the understanding. I know this is where I think, Mike, you and Pei are actually a little bit different, which I think is really good. Pei is I'm going to learn by example. I'm going to, as Pei always says, I'm going to jump into the pool without even checking if there's water. Whereas Mike, I think you want to make sure the water's in, the water's clean, everything's pretty smooth. You want to have a thorough understanding before you dive in and I think that, not that there's a right or a wrong way, but I think the risks, there's risks with both. If you do Mike's case, and sometimes people will get analysis paralysis because they take it too far. They're like, no, I need the temperature to be exactly 73.4 degrees before I can jump in. Well, that's too far. You're by that point, it's wintertime already and you can't even go in the pool. But in Pei's example, obviously you could die if you jump in the pool without water. So, so that there's extremes with both cases. I think finding that happy medium, having a good fundamental understanding of the basics and then diving in, but making sure you do dive in, you have to learn by example as well. So I can't thank you both enough.
Well,
no,
luckily,
that's a great point.
Well, I was going to say, luckily, this is not like a brand new idea that we just pull out of the thin air, right? We actually have data proven data of actually not just us doing it, but over, a couple hundred people at this point now doing various versions of this alongside with us. So the proof is in the pudding, right? Numbers don't lie, right? That stacking for 20-year plan, it's out there, right? Just take a look at, if you want to wait and do analysis for the next 2 years, guess what you miss out on? You miss out on the last 2 years of your income stacking income. Just like your policy.
Your policy itself, right? It's not the first 2 years you miss on the illustration. It's those last 2 years. Because we're all going to die at the same, time, whether you start now or 2 years later. But to your point, Nino, right, with the two different styles of, investing DNA that we enjoy or suffer, depending on how you look at it. When you have an IVC system, the way I feel it's a perfect, compromise, right? We get to flow our capital through, properly structured IVC, policies that pay dividends and compound tax-free every year. That's already safety that you can run your dollars through. Now, what you decide to, invest in on the other side, once you've leveraged it out of a very solid, safe, secure instrument, what you leverage over here, you can take a little bit of chance with, right? And at the very least, you're better off than going to the bank to get this money and then invest in your cousin Vinny's car wash that's going to blow up or, be shut down, right? Because now you owe a huge, sometimes 12, 15%, bank loan, right? As opposed to, owing yourself this money between 4 and 5.5, whatever percent that flows back and continues to grow every year for you. So,
and the beauty of investing using this method is that protection piece. You mentioned about cousin Vinny's car wash blowing up. So let's touch on that a little bit, right? If we're investing, do things happen? Absolutely, right? And if, let's say my investment, one of my stacks falls through, it didn't work out, right? It doesn't impact the entire system, especially if you're doing them in your, the stacking method, and you're kind of refilling, you're able to refill that bucket so fast that even if, you pay tuition in the investment world, right? This is kind of, Mike likes to joke, this is DIBS solves all financial woes.
I was literally going to close out with this. I'm like, every time that I have a question or something of like a direction, it always comes back to DIBS DIBS.
DIBS.
DIBS is the
That's
answer.
it.
That's it. Just
One
stop.
syllable.
Yeah,
DIBS.
just that's gonna be your automatic email response to everything. DIBS.
You got too
Dibs.
much debt? Dibs.
Dibs.
You
Too
wanna
much money?
invest?
DIBS.
Money. Get that money working. Yeah, lazy dollars. DIBS.
Oh, it's
I get it. And even if you're in this situation where, because some folks, they borrow to the hilt on all their policies and they are running the red line on their system, right? And we had this conversation. How does that work? Is that even sustainable? Blah, blah, blah. That aside, guess what? If you feel this pressure, even if it's just an emotional one, DIBS. You throw a stack in, relieve you. I'm telling you, you relieve
it's so
yourself.
true.
You relieve yourself at, whatever your stack size is, 150,000, wherever you're at, even 15,000. Okay, hey, you're getting prorated, credited back the interest. You reset. Remember that refinance example. Okay, now you get to spread that out over 36 months, but you've gained back that room in the one policy if it's one or whatever that you can continue cycling through and velocitizing your dollars.
Velocitizing.
Yes,
You
made
were-
that up.
Love it. Love it. See, everyone learns something new on these shows. They even learn new languages. So no, Mike, thanks again, man, for hopping in and being willing to explain. I said hopefully we can get you back on to dive deeper and deeper in. I know again these episodes are just phenomenal and I can't
and
wait
we
for
haven't
them to go
even
out.
and we haven't touched on like incorporating like all-in-one into this, and then
Stop teasing
talked
them,
about
Pei. Stop teasing them.
all these things.
No, we want people to stay tuned because there is going to be more coming up where we will dive deeper, and as we expand and as we build and build and build, we'll go from there. So, well, everybody, thanks again for tuning in to another hugely successful episode. Mike, Pei, appreciate you both so much.
Thank you.